Tonight, prepare for an unforgettable slow-burn paranormal romance where a fierce wolf king must choose between the crown of a kingdom and the quiet soul of the woman he cannot live without. After a devastating betrayal by the man she loved, Maeve retreats to a secluded forest cottage, choosing absolute isolation to protect her shattered heart, until a dangerously powerful stranger collapses on her porch in a torrential storm. Silas is a legendary alpha king who heals from his fatal wounds overnight, but as he stays to secretly guard her sanctuary, the intense, unspoken passion between them threatens to break all her defenses. The rain in Blackwood Valley didn't fall, it hunted. Maeve stood by the small, deep-set window of her stone cottage, watching the storm lash against the wild ferns and ancient oaks that fenced her off from the rest of the world. It was 11:40 p.m. Inside, the only sounds were the crackle of pine logs in the hearth and the steady ticking of a grandfather clock. The air smelled of dried lavender, beeswax, and isolation. 16 months ago, her world had been vibrant, noisy, and full of people, but it had also been a lie. The man she had given her youth to, the man she thought was her anchor, had shattered her dignity, leaving her for a woman who fit his high society expectations. The betrayal had been loud, public, and suffocating. So, Maeve had packed her life into boxes and retreated to this forgotten cottage at the forest's edge. She had chosen the silence. She had chosen to be a ghost, convincing herself that if she let anyone in, she could never be broken again. She was just about to extinguish the oil lamp when a heavy, muffled thud echoed against her oak front door. Maeve froze, her heart instantly leaping into her throat. She gripped the iron fire poker by the hearth, her breathing shallow as she approached the door. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling but steady with defensive resolve. Only a low, pained groan answered her, followed by the sound of a heavy body sliding down the wet timber. Wrenching the bolts back, Maeve gasped as the door swung open. Slumped on her porch, soaked to the bone, and bleeding profusely from a jagged tear across his chest, was a man. Even unconscious, his physical presence was staggering. Shoulders so broad they nearly filled the doorframe, clad in a shredded flannel shirt and heavy denim. Spurred by pure instinct, Maeve dropped the poker and dragged him inside, the sheer radiant heat radiating from his feverish skin, shocking her hands. He smelled of rain, iron, and something fiercely primal, like winter pine and ozone. With astonishing effort, she managed to hoist him onto her small velvet sofa. For the next 3 hours, she worked in the amber glow of the fire. She bathed his brow, washed the deep, violent gashes on his chest, and stitched the torn flesh with steady, gentle fingers. His face was a striking, rugged sculpture, a sharp jawline shadowed by dark stubble and high, aristocratic cheekbones. Every time her hands brushed his skin, a strange electric current shot up her arms, a warm hum that made her chest ache with a sensation she thought she'd buried forever. Exhausted, Maeve finally collapsed into the armchair beside him, falling into a restless sleep just as the dawn began to paint the sky a pale bruised grey. When the morning light broke through the window, Maeve woke with a start. The man was sitting up on the sofa, stretching his massive arms. The blanket had fallen to his waist, and Maeve's breath caught violently in her throat. The deep, jagged gashes she had painstakingly stitched just hours ago were gone. In their place were smooth, flawless planes of tanned muscle, bordered only by faint, fading silver lines. It was physically impossible. A miracle. He turned his head, and his eyes locked onto hers. They were startling, luminous shade of molten midwinter gold. "You saved my life," he said. His voice was a rich, dark baritone that vibrated straight through the floorboards and echoed in her chest. "Your wounds," Maeve whispered, her hands flying to her mouth as her defensive walls instantly slammed into place. "They're gone. How is that possible? Who are you?" The stranger offered a faint, devastatingly gentle smile, his gaze holding her with an intensity that made the rest of her quiet world fade into white noise. "My name is Silas, and I assure you, I am no ghost. Some of us simply heal faster than others." He didn't offer a deeper explanation, and Maeve, accustomed to guarding her own secrets, didn't push. But as he stood up, his towering, powerful frame filling her small room, the sheer warmth of his presence drove away the lingering chill of her isolation. Silas stayed. He told her he needed a few days to recover his strength, but as the days bled into weeks, the small cottage began to change. Silas was a silent, commanding force of nature, yet he moved around her space with a reverent, quiet gentleness. He fixed the rotting timber on the porch. He chopped a winter's worth of firewood, his broad shoulders gleaming with sweat under the pale sun. He rehung the heavy kitchen door that had sagged for a year. They lived in a breathless, unexpressed rhythm. They shared quiet meals of roasted vegetables and tea by the hearth, talking deeply about the peace of isolation and the weight of duty. Silas never spoke of where he came from, but his golden eyes followed Maeve everywhere she moved, burning with a fierce protection and a devotion that left her entirely breathless. He worshipped her with his silence, and she found herself falling deeply and irrevocably for a man who was entirely a mystery. Yet neither of them dared to speak the words. The ghost of her past betrayal kept her silent, and a heavy, unseen burden seemed to anchor his tongue. On the 14th night, the air in the cottage was thick with unspoken tension. A single candle danced between them on the small wooden table. Silas stood up, stepping into her space, his massive hand reaching out to gently, hesitantly cup her jaw. His skin was incredibly hot, sending a sweet, electric shiver up her spine. Maeve looked up into his whiskey gold eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. As he leaned down, his breath warm against her lips, the space between them vanished. They were a fraction of an inch away from a kiss that would rewrite her entire universe. The heavy, violent knuckles against the oak door shattered the silence like breaking glass. Silas froze, his jaw locking instantly, his features hardening into an expression of pure predatory fury. For a split second his canines caught the candlelight. They seemed just a fraction sharper. He stepped back from her, a low, rumbling growl vibrating in his chest. Maeve opened the door, her hands shaking. Standing on the porch was a tall, stern man with sharp grey eyes, dressed in an immaculate dark coat. He didn't look at Maeve. His gaze pierced straight through the cabin to Silas. "Alpha," the man said, bowing his head in absolute, unyielding submission. "The pack is in disarray. The northern borders are collapsing. The elders demand your return. Your beta has searched for 2 weeks. Alpha, you must come back tonight." Maeve's breath hitched in her throat. Alpha, pack. The puzzle pieces slammed together with devastating clarity. Silas wasn't just a traveller. He was a werewolf, the supreme legendary ruler of the Blackwood Pack, a king of beasts and men. Silas looked at the man, his voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute authority that made the air in the room grow heavy. "I told you I would return when I was ready, Rowan. The territory will fall without you, Alpha King," Rowan pleaded, his voice tight. "Tradition dictates you cannot abandon your post for a human sanctuary." Silas turned to Maeve, his golden eyes bleeding with a raw, agonizing vulnerability. He wanted to stay. She could see the heavy, suffocating pull in his chest. But she also saw the truth. He was a king, and his people needed him. She was just a woman hiding in a cottage. "Go," Maeve whispered softly, the old familiar weight of disappointment pressing down on her chest, though she kept her chin high, preserving her dignity. "Your people need you, Silas." With a heavy, broken breath, Silas stepped forward. He didn't kiss her. Instead, he took her hand, his thumb tracing her knuckles with a lingering, aching promise. "I will return, Maeve." Before she could answer, he turned and disappeared into the rainy dark with his beta, leaving her alone with a silence that now felt deafening. A week passed. The cottage felt larger, colder, and entirely empty without his towering presence. Maeve went back to her routines, tending her garden and stoking her fire, but the phantom warmth of his touch lingered on her skin like a brand. She had accepted that he was gone, a beautiful anomaly in her lonely life. On the 8th night, the rain returned. Maeve sat by the hearth, her head resting against her knees, when the front door slowly clicked open. She snapped her head up. Silas stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, his charcoal coat dripping onto the floor. He looked exhausted, but his golden eyes were burning with an intensity that leveled her entirely. "Silas," she gasped, standing up, her heart leaping. "What are you doing here? Your pack." "I forgot something," he murmured, his voice a low velvet rumble. In 3 strides, he crossed the room, his massive arms wrapping around her waist and lifting her off her feet entirely. He brought his lips down to hers, and the world simply exploded into light. It was a gentle kiss, deep, burning, yet possessive. An outpouring of 2 weeks of restraint and an ocean of hidden devotion. Maeve wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him back, with unyielding passion that she tried to hide, her soul recognizing his touch as home. When he finally pulled back, his forehead resting against hers breath was ragged. "Come with me," he whispered, his hands cupping her face. Join my pack, Maeve. Be my queen. Stand at my side in the court. Maeve looked into those beautiful, molten eyes, but a heavy sadness settled in her heart. She thought of the loud courts, the judgmental elite, the politics and the crowded spaces that had destroyed her once before. She had built her peace here, in the quiet. She couldn't survive in this storm. No, Maeve whispered, a tear escaping her eye. I love you, Silas, but I cannot live in that world. I am a creature of quiet. I belong here. Silas closed his eyes, his chest heavy with a broken ache. He was a king bound to a throne, and she was a woman bound to her sanctuary. He kissed her forehead one last time, a sweet, reverent gesture overflowing with silent heartbreak, before turning and walking out into the night, leaving her with a heavy heart that matched his own. 6 months passed. The season shifted from the wet chill of winter to the vibrant, blooming warmth of early summer. Maeve survived, but she no longer existed in the silence. She carried the memory of him like a golden shield. She missed him with an ache that never truly dulled. But she remained whole, her dignity intact, a resilient woman who refused to compromise her peace. It was a brilliant warm evening when the grandfather clock struck 6 p.m. The door to her cottage stood wide open, letting the scent of wild jasmine in. A shadow fell across the threshold. Maeve looked up from her teacup. Silas stood there. He wasn't wearing his royal doublet or his tailored coats. He wore a simple faded linen shirt and denim, his hair slightly wild, a travel pack snuck over his broad shoulder. His golden eyes were soft, completely devoid of the heavy, suffocating burden he had carried for centuries. Maeve stood up, her breath caught in her throat. Silas, what about your territory, your pack? Silas walked into the kitchen, dropping his pack to the floor. He stepped close to her, a beautiful, free smile breaking across his rugged face. He reached out, his massive hands wrapped around her waist and pulling her against his chest, where his heart beat a steady, thunderous rhythm of absolute peace. I left, Silas whispered, his voice a rich, enveloping caress. I passed the crown to Rowan. For 300 years, I lived for duty, Maeve. I lived in the dark so others could have light. But I realized my light is in this cottage. I don't need a kingdom. I only need you. I choose you. Tears of pure, overwhelming joy spilled down Maeve's cheeks as she looked up at her king, a dominant alpha who had willingly abdicated his throne just to live in her quiet world. I love you, she whispered. And I love you, he replied, bending his head to press his lips to hers. A slow, deep, eternal kiss that sealed their futures forever. Thank you so much for spending your evening in the valley with me. If you loved this slow burn, paranormal romance, and want to experience more tales of deep devotion in my human narration, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button and turn on the notifications. Until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.